Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the 10-minute report Jets. Before we jump in today, please make sure you follow me here on Spotify, as well as on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron, and make sure you guys are checking out other episodes on the podcast channel right here on Spotify. If you guys are unfamiliar with the 10-minute report series, that is where I take 20 minutes of study plus my already established knowledge to create a 10-minute podcast. Starting off with the biggest news for the Jets this offseason. One of the biggest news headlines of this offseason in general, Aaron Rodgers was traded to the New York Jets. The Jets got Aaron Rodgers, the 15th overall pick, and the 170th overall pick in this year's draft that already occurred. And for that, they traded the Packers for the 13th overall, 42nd, and 207th overall pick in the 2023 draft that occurred in April, and a 2024 second rounder that turns into a first if Aaron Rodgers plays more than 65% of snaps this season. So as long as Aaron Rodgers doesn't get injured, that will be a first rounder for the Packers. Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for quite some time. Last season, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay had 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions on 64.6% completion percentage. All of that without really any serious weapons, as the Packers would never draft too many weapons. In his career, though, Aaron Rodgers has just over 59,000 career passing yards, 475 touchdowns, and just 105 interceptions. I believe he's played for 15 seasons, I want to say, maybe 16, somewhere around there. Very good numbers, like I mentioned. He's been in the top handful of guys, of quarterbacks throughout his entire career since he's, developed into a starter in his third or fourth season. A couple of Aaron Rodgers' accomplishments include being a 4-time MVP. He was MVP of the NFL in 2011. In 2014, and then as well back-to-back in 2020 and 2021. So that's definitely, great news for the Jets, who have a very solid team, a very solid young team, who now has a Hall of Fame quarterback who has still shown that he can perform well. A couple of those other young guys that I'm talking about include Breece Hall, who was a rookie last year and had 463 yards, 4 touchdowns on the ground, and 218 yards and 1 touchdown receiving. All of those in just 7 games, about 5 touchdowns and about 800 yards in 7 games, because he had a ACL injury after that. He is expected to return early in this 2023 season coming up. They also have Garrett Wilson, who last year was an absolute stud wide receiver out of Ohio State. Last year he had 1,103 yards as well as 4 touchdowns, and those numbers were good enough to earn him last year's Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then the New York Jets went ahead and signed free agent wide receiver Allen Lazard. He played the past 5 years in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. So those two will not have any, lack of chemistry in terms of developing that. The only thing that's potentially slowing those two and their connection down that they've developed the past 5 years is the new playbook. But again, Rodgers has worked in this system before, although a couple years ago. So expect it to be, little to none, delay in delay in understanding the new system. But Lazard last year had 788 yards and 6 touchdowns. The New York Jets also signed wide receiver Mecole Hardman, who last year had 297 yards and 4 touchdowns in just 8 games. So if you kind of look at the potential full season there, that'll be about 600 yards and 8 touchdowns, give or take, on both of those. And the reason he missed part of the season was because of he had surgery in his hamstring, I believe, or groin area, and missed some time. Came back for the AFC Championship, I believe, and then was unable to play in the Super Bowl because of the same issue. It looks like it's just a sports hernia in the simplest terms, I guess. So he should be good. He should be full go, ready to go before the season starts. And then they also have Tyler Conklin, who last year, he's a tight end, if you guys don't know. Last year, he had 552 yards and 3 touchdowns with the Jets. And just shout out the Central Michigan Chippewas real quick, as Conklin is a CMU, he came from CMU. So fire up Chips. And then their offensive line is definitely in the bottom half of the league. Last year, they struggled very poorly, very badly because of the injuries. They kind of had a little bit of an inconsistency throughout the entire offensive line group because of these injuries to Elijah Vera Tucker and many other starters. I don't believe Mekhi Becton played last year. If he did, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know he's dealt with injuries his whole career. And this kind of turns into a make-or-break year for Mr. Becton, who had his 5th year decline, mostly because of injury. Mekhi Becton has shown a lot of potential in the games he's healthy in, but has missed quite a bit of time already in his young career. And then kind of moving over to the defense. Their defense is also very good. It's a lot of star players on that defense as well. Last year in 2022, the New York Jets were 2nd in points per game allowed. So a lot of that starts up front with defensive tackle Quinnen Williams, who just recently signed a 4-year, $96 million contract. I believe that makes it the largest contract in the New York Jets history. I'm not sure if that's for a defensive player or a defensive tackle, but I do remember seeing that note somewhere when that contract was released last week. But Quinnen Williams had 55 tackles, 12 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles in 2022. And then also on the edge, they have a couple of other guys, one being John Franklin Myers, who had 38 tackles, 5 sacks, and 4 tackles for a loss last season. And then they also have Carl Lawson, who had 33 tackles, 7 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss, and 1 forced fumble last season. Those 3 are backed up behind one of the potentially one of the top 5 starting linebackers in the NFL, especially because of his consistency throughout his career, and that would be C.J. Mosley, who last year had 158 tackles, 1 sack, 7 passes defensed, 5 tackles for a loss, and 1 interception. Mosley has had 100-plus tackles in 6 out of 8 years that he's been in the NFL. And one of those years, he only played in 2 games before an injury where he had 9 tackles. And then been in the league for 8 years, like I just said. He has 5 second-team All-Pros. So C.J. Mosley is having himself probably, I would say, if he keeps this up for another 4 or 5 years, a Hall of Fame-worthy career. And then they also have another linebacker alongside Mosley, Quincy Williams, who had 106 tackles, 3 sacks, and 12 tackles for a loss. Again, good numbers. The Jets have a very strong defense, which, we saw them perform well last season. They signed Chuck Clark this offseason, former Raven, but he unfortunately tore his ACL in OTAs and will be out for the season. And then to wrap up the 10-minute report, can't go without mentioning Sauce Gardner, who was a rookie last season, and he had 75 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 20 passes defensed. Those 20 passes defense led the league last season, and Sauce Gardner last year won Defensive Rookie of the Year, as well as he was a first team All-Pro member. Sauce was a rookie last year, is already arguably the best corner in the league, definitely top 3 off of last year. We'll see if he can maintain it. I've gone a little bit over my 10 minutes here, so that leaves me with just the record prediction for the 2023 New York Jets, where I predict they will go 12-5. That's all I have for the 10-minute report, Jets. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure you follow me here on Spotify, as well as Instagram, and check out all my other episodes. Go Ravens.